Reports have emerged that Russia has deployed a jam-proof drone to the battlefields in Ukraine and Russia. Just how does this drone work? Why is it such a leap forward? And what can Ukraine do about it? Oh, and the real question, who is ultimately responsible for this drone? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about all of it. Okay, so this is a really crazy story. This is a Russian fiber optic drone that beats any jammer. And you can see a literal picture of the drone here in which it looks like a standard FPV drone, but it contains a spool protected by a plastic case. And within this spool is actually fiber optic cable. This is the same stuff that your cable internet uses. And this is a purportedly named Product 55, a quadcopter that was reportedly jam-proof. Now, what makes this so interesting? Well, the answer is, of course, what Ukrainian military blogger Flash calls the mystery egg. And the mystery egg is the housing where the fiber optic cable is stored. Now, what is it essentially? Well, think of this drone as essentially a lure at the end of a fishing line, except instead of a fishing line, that line is a single piece of thin fiber optic cable. Now, purportedly, this drone had about 6.5 miles or 10 kilometers of fiber optic cable within it. And what the fiber optic cable does, it's a wire. It is the same thing that the fiber optic cable for your internet does. Literally, it connects the drone's feed to the operator's control terminal. And because it is encased in a wire, there is no jamming that can take place, right? You cannot disrupt the radio signals because there is no over-the-air signal taking place. Nothing is being broadcast. So not only is this drone potentially unjammable using current jamming technology, but it's also undetectable, right? Because a lot of drones, because they're broadcasting their signal continuously, they can be detected, located, and then countered. So this is a huge shift in technology. Now, you may think, man, how does the cable not get tangled? How does this sort of thing work? Well, the answer is actually that tech is pretty established. One, these are likely one-way drones. They're probably not expected to come back. And therefore, retracting the cable is not seen as that big a problem. And because they're drones, they're flying over the obstacle. It's, again, think of it like casting a line into a pond, right? Even if there's reeds or some trees, as long as you can get the cast over it, it'll arc over and plop in the water. And that's the trajectory. So even if the line sort of settles on top of the trees, it only would become a pain if you needed it to come back. And that, I think, is the thing with these FPV drones. Now, this is not actually new tech. The TOW missile in the U.S. arsenal operates on the exact same principle. This TOW literally stands for tube-launched, optically tracked, wire-guided. And the TOW uses just a thin copper wire that again allows the firer to actually see through a camera, so to speak, and guide the missile onto its target. You can see it was used, it was developed in the 70s, in 1970, and is one of the most widely used anti-tank guided missiles. It also was used on helicopters, and is but also in this picture, for example, was used in Kunar province, Afghanistan, right? So you can see how this is, again, 60 or 70-year-old technology that is still using the same basic principle as this drone, where when this thing fires, right, it's going to spool out wire that talks to this guidance system. And again, you can imagine, you could tell that in the decades that have passed, it's a bit more efficient, right? This is copper wire. Fiber optics going to have a much better fidelity as it communicates. But the idea is firmly the same. right? And interestingly enough, the origin for these wire-guided munitions actually was originally experimented with by the German army in late World War II, producing a modified version of what it called a Rostall wire-guided missile. So you can see that this is a really pretty mature military technology. Though the fiber optic is new, fiber optic is going to be lighter, thinner, smaller. It's probably going to be even lighter potentially than fishing line. Remember, this is 10 kilometers of spooled fiber optic are going to fit in here. That is a lot, right? So, of course, the interesting part to me, honestly, is that fiber optic wire-guided munitions weren't developed here. They're not developed here in the United States. This is a purely Russian battlefield innovation. But we're going to talk about who's behind it and what Ukraine can do to counter it. But first, of course, if you feel like life is stacking up against you with all kinds of new tricks and, I get it. I get it. And, the back to school season's here. It can feel like there's a gazillion things you have to do, but a little caffeine might just give you the edge you need to fight back. That's why you should check out Strike Gum. Strike Gum, 90 milligrams caffeine in every single piece, 100 milligrams alpha GPC, no sugar. No sugar at all in these. So that way you are going to get all the caffeine and energy you need, but none of the sugar crash. It's made in the USA, down in Denver by Liquid Core. So if you are someone looking for an energy drink alternative, Strike Gum's the way to go. Just check us out on strikegum.com. Definitely want to check out the 5-pack. That is going to be your best bet for, to get the caffeine you need wherever you are. Your home office, your office, glove box, gym bag. You're always going to have access to the energy you need. And crucially, you don't have to buy an energy drink, which are now $5 a pop. All right. I get it. So again, check us out, strikegum.com. Okay. So how does Ukraine counter this? Well, the answer is it sounds like at last, right? Ukraine is going to have to figure out a way to physically destroy the drones, right? Before it was much cheaper. You could see here's an example, of a, looks like a speculative or hypothetical drone, but you can see exactly what's going on. As it flies up, it spools out this thin fiber optic wire, allowing the user to communicate with it. And you can see how even with a little tension on the wire, this will actually, as long as it stays at altitude, it's going to have a pretty easy time of things. But the only way to get rid of this kind of drone, the only way to counter it, is to kill the drone or kill the wire or kill the operator. There's only 3 parts that you can interdict: the drone, the connection, or the operator. That's it. And so targeting previous jammers, right? They target EMF, they target radio frequencies, and unfortunately, it seems like this may be going the way of the Dodo. And instead, you're seeing now they're going to have to come up with actual killer drones, right? Drones that can smell out enemy drones and strike them, disrupt them, detonate them prematurely, or even sever these connections. But that itself is going to be probably the next evolution of drone warfare, and something that likely an AI drone, because this is the other unjammable drone tech, is to try to create an AI drone that doesn't need an operator. They just get some basic guidelines and off it goes. But that is dangerous and on the cutting edge. And again, wire-guided missiles are much, much more firmly established in engineering terms, right? We have 80 years, 70 years of data establishing how wire-guided munitions can and should work. So, who's really behind it? Well, that's where things are interesting, because these parts, these fiber optics, they're not made in China. In fact, the drone is made in China, and the fiber optic cable control also made in China. Right, there's the drone, and you can see it spooling out here, right? So you could see that in a lot of cases, these things are being brought in from China. Now, this innovation is pretty huge because, again, Ukraine also has their own answer to it, right? The Ukraine's running their own efforts at a fiber optic cable drone, right? And this is in response to the fact that in Ukraine, on both sides, about 75% of drones are taken down by jammers. So it may be worth it. If you can make a fiber optic drone for the price of 2 drones, it's a good deal. But again, the sources for Russia is that this is likely, these are Chinese. And so it's China that's, again, facilitating this using the classic Chinese scheme of saying, listen, China doesn't know if they're selling Russia fiber optic cable for internet to make sure that rural Russians can watch Putin's shitty speeches in beautiful HD, or if they're going to go to drones that are going to drop munitions on Ukrainians. And China doesn't want to know. That's the thing. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that if Russian orders a fiber optic cable quintuple month over month, that it's a clue that it might not be entirely for civilian purposes. But again, the Chinese, they want to make money. And if they say, listen, we don't know what they're for, we don't want to know, we just know that it's being purchased by an ostensibly Russian civilian company, then they get to claim ignorance and they get to claim they're not violating U.S. sanctions. This is the core problem with China and the Chinese kind of thinking that's been going on. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Hope you guys got something out of it. I'm going to keep you guys updated as we learn more. Huge thank you to our Colonel tier members, Martin Baum, Chris Rossi, Stuart Abel, Daniel Brown, Sergei Zinchenko, Chris Holmes, and Chris Gorsuch, as well as all of our Lieutenant tier members. Could not do this without you guys. Thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers.